In this unit, we're talking about biogeochemical cycles, and that is kind of a confusing long word, so I thought we'd split it into parts so you can see what it means. So the bio part means that we're talking about living things. The geo part means we're also talking about sediments and rocks, and the chemical part means we're talking about molecules, and obviously cycles are circular movements. So if you put all that together, we've got the circular movement of molecules through an ecosystem's living and non-living things. So we're going to talk about 4 biogeochemical cycles. We're going to start with the water cycle. So there are several things that you need to pay attention to with this. You need to know where you can find water and where it goes when something happens to it. So for instance, the ocean is a reservoir or source of water. Freshwater systems like rivers and ponds are sources of water. And then there's also a lot of water in the atmosphere. And then the things that are circled in red here are processes that move water around in an ecosystem. So water falls to the surface of the earth through precipitation, and then it returns to the atmosphere through the process of evaporation, and then it condenses from a gas to a liquid form, and then falls again through precipitation. And so it also goes around in the ecosystem in several different places. So we've got runoff happening over here. It infiltrates into the underground water supply over here, and it melts off of ice caps and glaciers over here. So generally the water cycle is water is found in several reservoirs, and it evaporates into the atmosphere, and then it condenses and falls back down. So let's talk about the carbon cycle. You need to know where you find major stores of carbon. One of them is in the soil. Another is in the atmosphere. And another is in the ocean, where it is dissolved into the ocean so that it is removed from the atmosphere, and then it is evaporated back into the atmosphere. And so the ocean actually takes carbon dioxide or carbon and then returns it to the atmosphere as well. Human emissions, this is the burning of fossil fuels primarily, are one of the major sources of returning carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So make sure that you understand that one. And carbon is found as a fossil, so where we get the fossil fuels are in this fossil carbon here. And so make sure you understand where to find carbon, the major sources of it, the atmosphere and fossils in the soil, and then the major processes of getting it moved around. So you've got evaporation and diffusion into the atmosphere, and then also terrestrial photosynthesis returns it, respiration by organisms returns it, and a lot of it is put back into the atmosphere through the process of burning fossil fuels. So the nitrogen cycle is interesting because actually the majority of gas in the atmosphere is nitrogen, about 80%. And what I've got circled here are major ways that nitrogen is taken into the atmosphere or put back out of the atmosphere. So one way is that sediments fall to the ocean floor and nitrogen is put to the ocean floor in that way, which means it's being taken out of the atmosphere. Nitrogen is removed from the atmosphere in a process that we call fixation and made available to living things. And then other bacteria return nitrogen to the atmosphere through the process of denitrification. So you need to know where to find nitrogen. The major sources of it are the atmosphere and at the bottom of the ocean floor. And then ways that it is returned to the atmosphere, such as denitrification and denitrification by organisms in the water, and then nitrogen-fixing bacteria return some to the atmosphere. So make sure you understand that. And then ways that it is removed from the atmosphere, fertilizers, terrestrial organisms take it out, marine food webs bring some in. So make sure you understand where nitrogen comes from and what happens, the processes that move it between one place and another. And then finally, we're going to finish up with the phosphorus cycle, and phosphorus is the only one of these cycles that does not have a large component in the atmosphere. So you'll see that there is no phosphorus component being represented up in the atmosphere here. So phosphorus, the major source of phosphorus is rocks, and some of it is moving around in terrestrial food webs, and some of it leaches into aquatic systems through fertilizers or through runoff. The majority of phosphorus on the planet is in rocks, and so there's very little of it moving around at any one time. So some of it gets dissolved into water bodies, and other parts of it get moved into the rocks. And so it's moved around a little bit, but the phosphorus cycle is smaller and simpler than many of the other nitrogen and carbon and the water cycle that we talked about. So make sure you check any supplementary material for differences and similarities between these 4 different types of cycles.